Anyway, Shavuot Tov, everybody. Good luck. We will first do the one blot, then we'll do another blot. We'll start from the Mishnah, Daf Ayin Tes Amud Beis. Kumlana Blat Gemara. It's the last Motzei Shabbos of Tafshin Pei Beis, and today's blot is Daf Pei. And we'll start from the Mishnah Ayin Tes Amud Beis on the bottom. Says the Mishnah, we're talking about the laws of Kesuvos and what she brings into the Kesuvos and her rights and her entitlements and so on. And we learned that Nichse Maloig, those plucked properties that she brings in, and the husband gets the dividends, but she, in essence, owns the item itself. And then we had Nichse Term Barzel, which he takes full responsibility. You evaluate it, you put it into the Kesuvos, and whenever if they divorce or if he predeceases her, she takes it back. She takes the value back. Says the Mishnah. Okay. If somebody spent money on his wife's estate, on this nichse meloig, he spent a lot of money, but the dividends were very little. Or kima, he spent a little money, but the dividends were great. Obviously, life is full of risks. That's the gamble you take. Masha his expenditure, whatever it was. Masha and if he received some dividends, that's how it is. The luck of the draw. This year you had a bad year. This year you had a good year. You can't go sit down and make calculations. Well, I invested more money than I reaped, so therefore, reimburse me somehow. It doesn't work that way. That's how it is. Ups and downs. But what happens if he spent money that year, but no dividends whatsoever, or he spent money and there were no dividends whatsoever? Then Yishava Kama Hoiti V'Yito. Then since he did not receive any dividends, he's no worse than a stranger coming into a field and investing in a field. And the law there says, how you will learn Baba Kama. If you go into someone's field, and even though you're on even though you were not invited, if I invested money and there's profits, you're entitled to get back some of the money. So he swears how much he spent.
What page is it on that scroll?
You spent the money, and that's whatever it is. That's what it is.
What page is it on that scroll?
79 B4.
Where?
B4.
The very
90,
end.
90,
The very end of the
Yeah, the
page.
top of 79 B4.
Oh, top. Okay, sorry.
94.
79.
79 B4.
You got it,
Okay.
Benny?
79.
79
Yeah.
B4.
Okay.
Maybe we should ban Art Scroll from this year. We'll save a lot of time.
Okay, says the Gemara, Kama Kima. You say that if he ate a little bit, he already got his dividends. He can't. It doesn't matter that his dividends were only a small fraction of what he invested. It doesn't matter. So what is the minimum? Says, I feel one dried fig. That's it. He already benefited. It doesn't matter. It cost. He put $1,000 into the investment. If he had a little bit of a dividend, that's it. Sorry, I feel good. They're covered, provided he sat down to eat it. If he just ate it while he was walking around like a snack, that doesn't count. It has to be something that you sit down for, so it has a little chashivas. Amar Rab Abba said, Amdi Bey Rab and Yeshiva Rab, they said, Afilu shigra de tamri, even if you have pressed dates, even if you have pressed dates together, which is even has less value. Nevertheless, you are you got your dividend, and that's it. Doesn't matter how much your expenditure was, you cannot claim it back. Boy, Rabibi asked the question: what about chaytza de tamra? Let's say you have dates and you made beer out of it, and this is the residual part of those dates. What happens then? Or you really pressed a lot of them together. Another shot, a lot of them together. It has even less value. Do we say the fact is you received some kind of a dividend, or that's like so insignificant it doesn't count, and therefore you have a right to claim back your expenditure? Teku, we don't have a resolution to that. What about achla derech covered, lo achla derech covered? What happens if he ate as a snack? I mean, there's still a certain amount that we can say, that's considered a dividend. And what's that amount? The Marava in Israel, in the West. Chad Omar, one of them said the size of an Issa. The Chad Omar, one of them said the size of a dinner. A dinner is far larger than an Issa. And the question is, if it's a snack, what's considered a dividend that's worthwhile? Amri Dayana the judges of Pumbedisa said that Rabbi Yehuda himself, when Uvda, he himself paskened bechabile zemoiris. He himself paskined that leftover, let's say, vines, which is not food for people, human consumption, it's just fodder for animals. Yet if you gave them to your animal, that's called a dividend. If you took from the field, that was your dividend, not even food that you can eat, but you just took some branches of vines and you gave it to your animal to eat, that's considered a dividend, and therefore you can no longer claim your expenditure. And says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda Tameh. Rav Yehuda is consistent with this view. The Amar Rav Yehuda said, Ochla, we know that if you eat, we had this in Kesuvos earlier on, if you eat 3 consecutive years on somebody's property, you have to have a contract. And if somebody comes and claims, hey, the property is not yours, you have to show your deed. But what happens once the 3 years go by, and the fact that you lived there for 3 years is called a chazaka of 3 years, that in itself is evidence that you purchased the property, because we don't believe for a minute that somebody who owns property would allow a squatter there for 3 years without protesting. So what happened? But those 3 years, you couldn't really eat the produce. Achla, orla. Let's say there were 3 years there, and it happened to be there were a bunch of saplings there, and the first 3 years you cannot even enjoy the fruits. The only thing you can do is the tree. The tree is not orla, only the fruits are orla. So what do you do with the tree? You gave it to your animal. And according to Yehuda, feeding your animal is considered like you benefited from the land, and therefore it can count as a chazakah. So the same thing will apply over here. That even though it's not your food, it's animal fodder. If somebody can mute themselves because some background noise. Even if somebody, if animal fodder is still considered chazakah. So the same thing shvius. If one of the years of the 3 years was shmita when you're not allowed to eat the fruit, but again the trees are permitted. Or shvius is like everything is hefker. Or for example, climb. And let's say it was climb, a mixture of, let's say, grapes and wheat or other things, grape and wheat, but and other things, and the branches did not become asr. Why aren't the branches forbidden, only the fruit? It's talking about that if you planted a tree from the beginning, climb, that every part of it is forbidden. But if you grafted on climb to an existing tree, and then the branch grew like 200 times what it originally was, then that becomes climb. But if the tree part didn't grow to that extent, so the tree remains non-climb, and the fruits become climb. So another example, what's Rabbi Yehuda saying? Even though all you're doing is feeding it your animal, it's still considered as if you're benefiting. So the same thing here. If he took from his wife's field, the dividend was he took the vines, not the grapes, and he gave it to the animal to feed, that's good enough. That's considered a dividend, and he can no longer claim the expenditure. Hareze chazaka tzebala chazaka. Tana, if somebody invests money, he married a young girl, not by her father, because then the marriage would have been from the Torah. Her father passed away, so she was married by her siblings or by her mother, which is only midrabanan. And she brings in properties into the estate, the nichse malay, those plucked properties, and he spends money on it. This is very different. And why will it be different? It will say over here, he's treated no differently than he goes into a stranger, and we can collect back the expenditure if the profit is greater, and so on, as the dinim are there. Why my timer? Why should it be any different than ordinary husband and wife, where if you receive some kind of a dividend, you can no longer claim your expenditure? My time of here's different. The husband is walking on eggshells. He has no idea what is my wife going to do. She reaches the age of 12, she can walk right out. Why should I invest all this money today and I won't see the dividends for years to come? What for? So to give him an incentive that he should put effort into these properties, we say that if you invested money, you can claim them back. Even if she walks out, you can claim the expenditure back. And we're not going to say, oh, you had a modicum of a dividend, that's good enough. It doesn't work that way. My time of the
Does he take off the dividend from the amount he gets to pay back?
Yeah, he takes, yes, it's called the shavach. I mean, we'll learn it in moments here, but how it works. In fact, Gemara will bring down a little bit later down. But there's the profit, and then there's investment, and we work out, which one he gets back. If the investment is greater than the profit, he should only get the value of the profit. The profit and the investment, he gets back the value of the investment. We don't want him to lose out. We don't want him to say, you know what, forget about the property. Why should I invest time and effort into it? Said the Gemara, there was a woman. The Nofel Abba Mezuz is a woman that she had a Yerusha of 400 zuz in a faraway country, in the city of Chazoi, which is very distant from wherever she lived. And for whatever reason, very strange, Ozil Gaber, her husband went to collect it, and it cost him 600 zuz to fly there, to get there, and to stay there overnight till he got the money and come back home. He spent more money than the value of the whole thing. Apik Shitmeya, he spent 600 zuz in order to obtain this 400 zuz. I see Arba Meya, and he brought back the 400 zuz. But how did
I've lost the place again. Help me, please. Sorry. Where are we?
It's 80, A2 at the bottom of the first column. 80, A2.
Okay, so what happened was he spent a fortune, and but we learned before that if you spend money and you didn't collect any dividends, you can ask for the money back. Now, in this case, there's no way that he can get more than what the original was, but he can claim back the $400. Perhaps he had no idea that it would cost that much. It turned out to be that's what it cost him. So at least he would claim back the $400 that he had. So what happened was, but he ran out of money. He needed to take from the principal $1, one zuz. Now, if we treat that one zuz like a dividend, so then we learned before that if you received even the smallest dividend, that's it. You can no longer claim the expenditure, because if he's using the money for himself, it's like a dividend. And therefore, he has no claim at all for any of the money that he invested. Vishakum and he took from one zuz from the principal. Also, the Kamei Rabami, he went to Rabami. He had a dispute with his wife. He wanted his money back. Look, his expenditure happened. The fact is he got a little bit of a dividend, and therefore he got it. He took $1 for himself. That's it. Question about me. They said to him, that's talking about when he's taking a dividend, I guess, for his own benefit. Over here, however, he's taking the principal and he's using it for the principal. He's taking it in order to be able to bring the money along. So he's not using it for himself at all. Therefore, it's not a dividend. This is part of the expense. So he had no dividends. Oh, he said, that's what happened. I guess I didn't explain to him fully what the money was spent for. You can't have this is a case of paying, investing and not receiving any dividend at all. Is he shava kama he swears how much he took, the gito, and he collects, but he does not collect any more than what he spent. than the principal. Sorry. If the principal is 400, he cannot collect more than 400. Says the Gemara further, he swears how much he spent if there's no dividend and he collects. He said, provided, when do we say he swears and he takes? He just made this cryptic comment when you can assess the profit versus the expense. So what exactly did he mean with that cryptic statement? There's two ways of understanding it. Is he trying to be lenient or trying to be stringent? Is he trying to be lenient and say as follows, that if the profit and the expense are the same, then he has to swear. But if the profit is more than the expense, then why swear? Let's say that the profit was $500 and he spent $400. She's still making $100. So why have the husband swear? Is that what we're trying to say? And the only time you swear is that if the profit and expense are exactly the same. So she's left with nothing to show for it. So therefore, we make him swear. But if the profit is less than the expense, he shouldn't even have to swear. Is that what he's trying to say? Or is he trying to be actually strict? And to say that if the expense is greater than the profit, then all you collect is the amount of the profit. You cannot, if you put in $500 and the profit is 400, you cannot collect more than the 400. And even if you swear from today to tomorrow, why should she lose money on the fact that you invested money? But if the profit and the expense were the same, or the profit is more, she only gives them the expense, the equal expense, but you always have to swear. So which one is it? So which one are you going? Which way are you going? What Abai says? So Abai first wants to say to be lenient, that if the profit was greater than the expense, so even if you pay out your husband, she's still ahead because she has a profit, then he doesn't have to swear. He takes it out of shua because we assume they trust each other. Trust each other. There are sneaky, conniving husbands who will cheat and they will lie. In other words, Why should he swear? Let's say, he make a bub so he'll make sure always that let's say he spent $400 profit, he only spent 200, he'll save us 350. Because as long as it's not equal to the amount of the profit, he doesn't have to swear. So he can cheat his wife. She comes from a rich family and she's not very giving. So he can cheat his wife. Elamor says, Rabbi, you're right. It's coming to be stringent. That if the expense was greater than the profit, he can only collect the expense what's equal to the profit. She should not be losing any money as a result. But always you have to swear, but you always have to swear. Says the Gemara, so we have a question. What happens? What happened to the husband? Shahidid Arisin. What happened? The husband went and hired an aris is a sharecropper. A sharecropper, it puts a lot of time and effort into your property, but instead of paying him a wage, he gets a share in the profits. It's an inducement to cause them to work harder, and they don't work 9 to 5. They'll work whatever hours it takes, 6 days a week, to make sure that everything is profitable, because they have a vested interest. They benefit as well. So what happened was this husband hired these sharecroppers, but then they divorced, which means the property goes back to her. Mahu. And the question is, does she have to pay out now and these arisin or not? Mahu. Do we say adaita the Baal Nochis? Do we say adaita the Baal Nochis that these sharecroppers are actually working for the husband? Istalukle Baal, now that the husband is no longer involved with his wife, they're divorced. Is istalukilu? They also lose out, and that's it. They cannot collect from the wife because she never worked for her. Nor what do you call it? And nor can they collect from the husband because they knew that they're working for the husband. They knew that if they ever get divorced, they'll never get paid. So they came in with the eyes wide open, and they knew they're taking a risk. So they get nothing at all. Added to the even though the husband hired them, they wouldn't work for him, they're working for the land. Whoever the owner of the land is has to reimburse them. The land is still there, so she has to pay them. That's what they're asking. Ask a question. I understand your question. How is this different than the case of if somebody, what we see, we had somebody goes into someone else's field, without permission. They saw the field the trees were dying and everything else. So they went in and they planted properly this garden without any permission. They still get reimbursed. Whichever is less. If the profit is less than the expense, they get the equivalent of the profit. If the expense is less than the profit, they get the equivalent of the expense. Says the Gemara, Hasam the leka inish the Torah. He says over there, the big difference. Over there, you walk by a field, you see all these trees dying. Obviously, there's nobody there to work on the field. So they went in, they had every right to work to help another person out, and they should also get compensated for something. Hasam leka inish the Torah. Over here, the wife can say, why should I pay you? I have a husband. That's what his job is. The deal was he gets a dividend, but he has to invest the time and effort. I don't need you guys. You're not working for me. My Havila, bottom line. Oh, but I want to be sure. Chazina, we see. If the husband himself knows how to deal with the land on his own, he's himself like a sharecropper, then he's talking about they work. So therefore, she can definitely say, I rely on my husband. He's not working for me. My husband, he knows how to deal with a farm, and that's it. But he himself is not really an artist. You can't say I rely on my husband. Your husband is useless. His 2 left hands. Then I don't let it kind, but then they're no worse than a stranger coming into your land and helping you out that you have to reimburse them. Another question: the husband's rights to the woman's property, the milchim aloig, are that he gets a dividend. How far do we take this right? Is the right merely that he can take the dividends, or does he have a right to sell the right to the dividends as well? Is a Baal Shemocha Karka Lepedus, a husband who sold the land of his wife to somebody, but not for the land itself, it's essentially his wife, but the right to the Pedus. Mao, what's it then? Mi Amrinan. Do we say that what did he sell? He sold the rights. He has the rights. He can unsell it. They only said that the husband has the right to the fruits. And the reason is, there's another reason. Previously we learned what's the whole idea of saying that the husband gets the dividends. We said because him getting the dividends, he will, he will take care of her. But now we're saying a new reason. The reason, you know what the reason is? We want that if the husband gets a dividend, there's plenty of money roaming on the house, and therefore he'll be generous and he will, take care of his wife, buy better food, and take care of all of these things. So before we learned that the nichsim beloig was so that, as we learned before, he should pay for the ransom of his wife if he's taken into captivity, which seems to be very commonplace in those days. But there's another reason we're giving now, and the other reason we're giving now because of Avra Beis. Aval is vuniloy, but no one ever gave him the right to unsell it. Is Yehuda Mar Bar Mashmed Rava Mar. So we have an argument. Yehuda Mar Bar Mar said the name of Rava Masha Asa. If he sold it, he has the right to sell the rights. Now Papa Mashmed Rava, Papa comes along and said the name of Rava as well. You have no right to sell the rights that you had to the dividend. He made a mistake. It's not that Rava said one thing today and another thing tomorrow. No, he misunderstood a certain episode that happened and he interpreted wrong. So Rava never changed his mind. What happened? There's a woman, the idol of the Gavra Tartia Moshe. There's a woman that she brought into the marriage 2 maids to her husband to take care of the house. Meanwhile, this husband married a second wife. And he took that second wife, and he took one of the maids. He said, "This should be your personal maid. Apart from doing chores in the house, she'll also do things for you personally." So it's as if he unsold the right that he has to. What are the dividends? The dividends are the work that she does in the house. It's as if he unsold it. And also the first woman who brought the 2 maids screamed, "Hey, what right did my husband have to take one of the maids and make the private of the second wife, make her a private maid?" Rav ignored it. So the one who witnessed this event, saw what he thought, he thought, listen, even though he has the right, so if he sold the right, so he gave the right to another woman, fine. But he misunderstood. The only reason why we say that we want the dividends to go to him. The second reason is so there should be a more comfortable life. But how could I here, since who do we give it to? To the second wife who lives in the same house. So at the end of the day, even though the maid is considered the maid of the second wife, most of the work that she does is in the house, and everyone benefits from it collectively. So therefore, he didn't ever diminish in any way the Ravach Beis. The hilchos on the halacha is.
She does. If he gives the maidservant to the second wife has to work less, because if she brings in a wife, if she brings in a slave,
so what? So, but as long as he also cleans the house and everything else, all the duties of the house.
The first wife also has to work more because she's only brought in 1 slave.
Oh, you talking about good question? Oh, you're talking about if you bring in she's still brought in 2. So whatever the law is regarding 2, we had before 2 maids, that stays the same. He only has the dividends of it. Not remember in essence, she still owns those 2 shvachas. So that so that doesn't change. It's the dividends, the use. So the Gemara, is if a husband sells the property with the rights, the halach is, however, that like a papa, that it's not he cannot sell at all the rights that he has to the dividends. Why not? My time, Abai says, because the people who are buying it, they don't know if they're going to keep it long term. Because what happens if the husband dies first or they divorce? It goes right back to the wife. So they're not going to spend too much money on the field, and eventually the field might just die. That's the reason why we don't want the husband to on-sell the dividends. The husband himself will invest time because he hopes that he's much more hopeful. But to give it to a stranger, they're not going to invest money in the property properly. And Rabbi says, Rabbi says the whole idea is that there should be plenty of money floating around the house. And if he sells the property, he'll get a bulk sum, but he'll use it all up and that's gone. On the other hand, Rabbi says dividends are constantly coming in. And therefore the house, is a much more comfortable place to live in. So what's the 2 reasons? A few differences. What happens? Let's say the land is right next to the city, so the husband can see if these buyers are not taking care of the property, he can take it back or put some work into it. So therefore, in this case over here, there's no problem of shema taxi, but there is a problem of avabesa. You're not getting your constant dividends. Second is inami bal orus. The husband himself is a farmer, so he can fix up. What do you mean? He is the orus. He's the sharecropper. So when he sells he sells the dividends, he's not giving them the property to work. He'll still work on it, except that he will give them all the produce that comes out of it. So therefore, there's no concern that the property will devalue or be degraded. On the other hand, you'll lack the ravach basic. It's no longer against the constant flow of dividends. We're talking about money, and he takes the money and he takes money from the first, but he invests in a business, so there'll be plenty of money in the house, maybe even better than just from the farm. So on the one hand, ravach base is not a concern, but if it's degrading the property, it's still a problem. It's her property, and she's worried that the property will be neglected. Next Mishnah. Shemeres Yavam. Now we're going to talk about a woman that is a Shemeres Yavam. We had a whole Gemara Yavam Masana. Shemeres Yavam is like in a state of in between. She's partially attached. We had a Zika. We had a big machlekes how far we take Zika. She's partially attached to her brother-in-law, and she's partially independent. So sort of in between, an in between stage. And so Shemeres Yavam. She's now in waiting, and she not on the chosim. Now, what happens to Shemeres Yavam is she does not collect the ksula from her first husband because she's about to marry the brother, who'll step in, and the brother just the same ksula that was valid for the first husband is now valid for the second. You don't write a new ksula; it's a continuation because the husband steps in, Shimon steps into Reuben's shoes. But what happens was she not on the chosim. She inherited an estate while she was in that in that time waiting. Moedim Beishamai Beisil. We had yesterday an argument Beishamai Beisil while she was engaged, and she had she inherited something. Can she sell it that period while she's engaged, or does the husband have certain rights? Beishamai says she can sell it outright. Beisil Zachatchili should do it, but the Eved, it's a sale. But when it comes to Shemeres Yavam, which is a step less than a woman who's engaged, so the husband's rights or the brother-in-law's rights are very little, then everyone agrees. She can sell it and give it away, and it's a valid sale. So what happens now? She dies. Okay, she's a Shemeres Yavam, and she dies. What happens now with the ksuva from her first husband? Who gets it? She has her family, and the husband has his family. And the husband died before her, but the problem was if the husband died before her and they had children, then obviously everything goes back to her. The problem was that there was a brother-in-law who was going to step into the husband's shoes. That's sort of in there somewhere. So there's him and his heirs, and then there is her original family. What happens to the ksuva? When we say ksuva, there's three parts to the ksuva. There's the ksuva, the $100 and $200, and anything else he adds to it. There's then the ksuva, the dowry that the woman brings in, or the father of the woman brings into the marriage. And then there is the nichse maloig, the property that she brings into the marriage, which is not, but nichse maloig are not incorporated in the ksuva. Then you have the nichse tzarbarzel. These are property that she brings in, they're assessed, and they put a value into the ksuva, and the husband takes full responsibility, regardless of what the value is. When they divorce, they have to give that value what's written in the ksuva. Tosis brings that the vast majority of women used to bring nichse tzarbarzel. They did not really go ahead with nichse maloig. Rather, they did nichse tzarbarzel. They would put an evaluation on it, and we had a whole system of doing evaluations. Remember, we added a certain amount to these, or diminished, they were reduced because they used to exaggerate by dowry and all that. So. What do they do with her ksuva? And the ksuva to him means the dowry, according to Rashi, and others disagree. And the nichse maloig, these are the properties not written in the ksuva, but these come into the marriage, and the husband gets dividends, and then you take it back when the marriage dissolves. What happens? Beishamai says, Yachloiku Yoshe Habal im Yoshe, that when we say over here that we divide, there's two groups of heirs, the Yavam, and there is her family. So they divide equally, and we're talking about the nichse maloig. But when it comes to the ksuva, Reuben is supposed to pay a ksuva to her, and then the brother steps in, and then she passed away. That ksuva does not go to her family because the ksuva was never given over. The money is sitting with Reuben, and now Reuben's heir is his brother. So that does not get divided. But the nichse maloig, which originally was hers, and the husband gets the dividends, and if the husband outlives her, he gets the property. So we divide it equally between the two families. But Beisil says, Nechasim b'cheskasim. There's a machlekes, big machlekes, how to learn this. We'll learn how Rashi learns. Rashi learns there are three things being said here, not like Tosha learns there are two. Nechasim, when it comes to Nechasim, what's Nechasim referring to? That's the nichse tzarbarzel. That's the property she brings in, and you fix a price on it, and the husband takes full responsibility to make sure that she gets that equivalent of price whenever it gets resolved. So the nichse tzarbarzel is b'cheskasim. You leave it where it is. And Rashi brings down the Gemara later on, argues in Bava Basra, where when we say leave it where it is, what does that mean where it is? Is it in where it is by the husband because he takes full responsibility, or where it is by the wife because it was her property initially? Big machlekes. Okay, that's where you leave where it is. Case number 2, uksuva. When it comes to the ksuva, becheskes yosheh bal. When it comes to the ksuva means $100 to $200, and the addition that he adds to the ksuva, that remains with the husband. When it comes to the dowry, that goes back to her family. But nechasim hanichnasim v'hayotzim ima becheskes yosheh. So too the nichsim aloi goes back to her family. Okay, next. What about hiniach achim moyis? What about, let's say, the brother did not leave any, Ruvain, the original husband, did not leave any land, any properties, but he left behind metaltalin, portable items. And the big machlekes we had already, if metaltalin are indebted to a ksuva or not. Rab Meir holds that they are, we had a few days ago, and a chum holds they're not. And this is Rab Meir. So if the brother left behind money, yilkach behen karka. If the brother left behind money, he can go ahead and buy property. You have to go ahead and buy property because this money now belongs to the ksuva. But who oichel peinis, and he goes ahead and eats the fruits. In other words, that this money, there's a lien on this money from the ksuva, so therefore he has no right to use it for himself. He has to go ahead and purchase property, land, and that's what the ksuva will rely on. And the dividends, as usual, goes to him. Paid is hatlushim in the karka, so do fruits that were cut off. So again, these are metaltalin. Meir holds they're indebted to the karka. Is yilka ben karka, you buy land, buhu oichel paidus. And again, the husband gets a dividend because these are all indebted, mortgaged, encumbered to the ksuva. What about a mechabar ben karka? What about the attached to the land? We had a machlek a few days ago. Meir holds that attached to the land has the same status as land itself. So what do you do with these fruits? So we assess the value of the land without the fruits, the value of the land with the fruits, and that's the value of the fruits. And then he has to pay you that money, buy land with it, and he gets the dividends. You value the property, what's it worth with the fruits, without the fruits. The leftovers, you buy land, he gets the dividends. Because all this is encumbered to the ksuva. However, the Chachamim say, the fruits that are attached to the land, they said before, is metaltalin, so therefore it belongs to him. However, the Gemara later on is going to say it's impossible it belongs to him. The fact is, the brother left it behind, it was attached to the ground. That's part of the land at the moment, according to everybody. And the Gemara will say later, we have to change edit the Mishnah. Instead of saying shaloi, it says shalot. It's actually hers. But at lushim in the karka, this is what they argue with Rameir. If it's already been harvested, which means it's now just metaltalin. Metaltalin are unencumbered. A woman does not rely on metaltalin because they know you can hide it, you can get rid of it very quickly. So therefore, it's not encumbered to the ksuva. It's called hakoidim zachaber. Whoever gets the first, it belongs to them. Kodim hu zacha. If he gets the first, the husband, or Shimon, the future brother-in-law, they're zacha. Kodim he. If she gets the first, then it comes hers. And again, yilkel ben karka, you buy with it land, v'hu oichel peidus, and he gets the dividends. But kansa, once the brother-in-law marries her, hadikish l'chol davar, it's considered just like his wife. And the Gemara later on will explain what do you mean like his wife, in what regard. That's tomorrow's Gemara. However, even though it's now totally his wife, he doesn't write her a new ksuva. He still uses the ksuva that was written to the first husband, and that's the ksuva that's active now, because he is stepping into the shoes of the first husband. He should not say to her, here, take this, this is the money, this is where you're going to collect your ksuva from in the future. Cannot say that. The entire, all the assets of Reuben are encumbered to this ksuva. And therefore she can collect from any of that, and we'll see later whether he has a right to sell it or not. V'chein likewise, if he did sell it, what happens? V'chein likewise, forget about a Yavama sister, even his own wife. Should never say, here is the money you collect, should not say that. Because then the wife feels very uncomfortable because you can lose the money and then she has nowhere to collect the ksuva from. All the nechasim, the entire assets are encumbered to the ksuva. But there's a difference between a sister-in-law and a wife. When it comes to a wife, even though all the assets are encumbered, he can sell whatever properties he wants. And as long as he leaves something behind for the ksuba, and if it comes that they get the marriage dissolved and she has to collect the ksuba and there's not enough money there, she has every right to go to every one of the buyers and to collect, or to the most recent ones and work her way back to collect the full value of a ksuba. But when it comes to Yibum, you have no right to sell any of those properties. Okay, they're Reuven's properties. You have no right to sell them. Girsha, if he divorced her, Ein lo ela ksuva. If he divorced her, then he only has to pay her out. And as long as they didn't get divorced, obviously there's the encumbrance and all the assets. But once he divorced her, then that's it. He pays her out. That lien is gone. Ein lo ela ksuva hechzira. Let's say he divorced her, and then he takes her back as his wife. Harehi kechol anoshim. She's treated in every respect like any other woman. The ein lo ela ksuva vad. And no, if he comes back, she still continues with the very first ksuba, like your own wife. If you take her back, you don't pay her out 2 ksubas. If you divorce your wife and then you take her back, you don't pay her a ksuba once and then give her a ksuba a second time. The very first ksuba, it becomes activated again if you didn't pay her out yet. It becomes activated again. Same thing with the Yibam. Says the Gemara, Yiboyeluhum. So we have a question. Actually, let's take a pause over here for 1 minute, and then we'll do Sunday's blot.